We're recording.
Good afternoon and welcome to the July 20th Finance Committee meeting of the State Bar. As a reminder, this meeting is being recorded. If I could, I'd like to request our committee coordinator, Tenny Chan, to please call the roll.
Not present. Buenaventura?
Present.
Good, not present. Sowell
Present.
and Tony.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is the call for public comment. The State Bar staff will attempt to try to recognize folks in the order in which they appear. And for those of you who are on Zoom, you can use the raise your hand function. For those of you who may be participating by phone, by pressing the *9 key, we'll get you also recognized. And obviously, due to time restrictions, we try to limit public comment to about 3 minutes. And you will be given a countdown at the 30-second mark during your public comments to try to keep you on track. And Tenny, do we have anybody who has signed up for public comment?
We have two members of the public in the attendee pool. The first one is Todd Hill.
Very good. Mr. Hill, you're recognized, and when you're ready.
Thank you very much, Mr. Soul. I do appreciate the opportunity to address the committee. Though I must say it's unfortunate that at this stage, nearly, 1,100 days after you've initially been informed of my circumstance, I'm surprised I'm still in the same circumstance. That said, I would like to talk about a couple of other opportunities the bar has related to process improvements. And I also have a couple of points about mechanisms by which substantive transparency can be achieved. There are lots of comments and there's a lot of self-congratulation and all sorts of things that seem to happen. But the reality is there's a lot of rhetoric of movement. But if you look at the actual numbers, at how things moved, I mean, it could be over the last 5 years, it could be over the last, honestly, 50 years. If you look at DEI, for example, and you look at actual improvements there, and you look at the communities that have overachieved in that area and the communities that are still in the same position, right? There's a lot of rhetoric. There's always forward rhetoric. There's new audit committees, but the status quo always is the same. You hear the same complaints of corruption or inappropriate process or lack of process. There's always a new dog and pony show, a new public trust liaison. Very interesting, right? But is it because you were simply burying complaints and didn't have a situation where you didn't want a public trust liaison? Now it's impossible to bury the complaints, and so you have a public trust liaison who has really no authority to resolve the core issues that the bar still suffers from. How long do mere words suffice to show good faith intent? When does it become the case that it is impossible to justify the circumstance we find ourselves in today? I think we've reached that point. We've exceeded that point.
You have 30 seconds.
I need none of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Hill. Tenny, who do we have next?
We have Michael Sternberg.
Mr. Sternberg, you're recognized, and please proceed.
Good afternoon, Bar Member Sowell. Can you hear me?
Absolutely can, sir.
Thank you. The new clock is fabulous, so I don't need my 30-second warning. I promise I'm watching it. Sir, I do want to thank you for appearing at the Joint Judiciary Committee. I enjoyed learning about you and your positions, and there was a lot of insight there. about what's going on and what's going to go on in the future, and I appreciate that. I also want to thank, I saw the general counsel in the background. Thank you for your appearance there too. And Leah, thank you for not vindictively interfering in what I'm doing here, unlike what most government workers do. I really appreciate that, even though I haven't had a chance to talk to you ever. And Louisa, of course, always thank you. The previous speaker was right, of course. There is a lot of rhetoric. We got to get things moving, and we got to get them moving quickly. I talked about why the Inspector General is not a good idea. I know that was a particular interest of yours, Board Member Solwell. I hope you go back and look at the public comments that I made on that. I know this is the Finance Committee, so that's what I want to talk about. You guys talked at the Joint Committee of the Judiciary about financial troubles. Well, in one aspect, the money is right there for you to go get. I'm looking at the State Bar Court of California, Business and Professions Code, section 6086.10, authorizes the imposition of, excuse me, discipline costs in disciplinary matters. Perhaps if you weren't kicking out all the discipline investigations and not doing them, you might be able to recoup some costs. I would also strongly suggest, if it doesn't exist already, that you find some way of obtaining sanctions from attorneys who are disciplined or disbarred. The judges that are running the civil courts do not routinely impose sanctions, and they do not routinely follow any rules or laws. So that is not a mechanism for litigants to protect themselves, but that could be a mechanism for the bar to go and earn some money. Send investigators out to any family court in the state and just sit in the courtroom. I promise you, any courtroom, pick one at random. You will see felonies and professional misconduct committed all day long. I believe a snitch rule was recently passed, or it's still in the works, requiring attorneys to report misconduct of one another. I think attorneys should be required to report the misconduct of judges as well. Lastly, I want to say that the non-lawyer board members should not passively take the advice or instruction of any lawyer board members. I think the lawyer board members, or lawyers in general, do not have the authority that society has granted them in terms of what the law is and what the law isn't. I can't tell you how many Stanford graduates I've seen who have no idea what basic due process is. And I'm going to run out of time on my last point, so I'll bring it up at the main board member meeting. But again, thank you for at least allowing me to speak. I think this is an important part of transparency. And of course, I post my comments on my YouTube channel at Father in Exile. Thank you.
Mr. Sternberg, as always, appreciate your comments, and I will take the time to take a look at your comments relative to the Inspector General. Tinny, do we have any more for public comment?
No, we do not at this time.
Very good. So let's move on with our agenda. I think the next item is the chair's report. And in the interest of time, I'm going to be extremely brief, but I did want to sort of alert and remind the members of the Finance Committee that the board's fiscal situation remains very much in flux and of concern. And I just wanted to make sure that that the members of this committee understand that it's going to require our full attention. And tomorrow at our full board meeting, I think you're going to hear a little bit more in closed session. You'll get a readout in a little bit more detail in terms of where things stand. But for now, I think we should just go ahead and just sort of get on with the business of the Finance Committee today. And so with that, I think the next item on our agenda is to take a look at the minutes from the May 18th open session of the Finance Committee. And I would just sort of ask if any of the members of the committee have any modifications or clarifications that they'd like to make to the minutes. And if not, would entertain a motion to move them.
I move to accept.
Second. Moved by Mr. Tony, second by Mr. Buenaventura. Tinny, would you please call the roll?
Broughton, absent. Buenaventura?
Aye.
Good, absent. Tony?
Aye.
Sowell?
I'm an aye.
3 ayes, 0 nays. Motion, meeting minutes are adopted.
Very good. The next item before us is approval of the proposed 2023 budget amendment. And this is an action item, and it'll be presented by our Chief Financial Officer, Araceli Montoya Chico.
Yes, thank you, Arnie. I do not have a presentation for this item. All the details are in your agenda item that's been posted on the website, but I will give a brief summary of what the amendments are. So we have amendments that will impact primarily the Grants Fund, the Legal Services Trust Fund, and the Legislative Activities Fund. First off, with the Legislative Activities Fund, we are proposing a reduction of revenue since this fee actually changed starting in 2023 from an opt-out to an opt-in, which we were expecting revenues to be reduced. So we accounted for it on the budget compared to prior years, but the actuals came even lower than we expected. So that is the first amendment that we're proposing, is to reduce the revenue. We don't expect to get any more. So we're reducing the budgeted revenue by about almost $500,000 to actuals. The next amendments are grant related funds. The first one, we have consistently been getting higher interest rates in our IOLTA accounts, as well as higher account balances. So that has significantly increased the IOLTA revenue. So we just want to correct that in our budget by increasing revenues in the and this sits under the Legal Services Trust Fund. So increase that fund by $67 million. Again, these amendments will help correct a lot of the variances that you'll see in my next item, and we won't have these variances going forward once we correct these. The last proposed amendment is to the Grants Fund, and that's for the Homeless Prevention 4. There was just a small decrease in expected revenues, so we are adjusting that fund slightly by about $500,000. And in your attachment A is where we have the details of the proposed amendments and whether they're increasing or decreasing revenues and or expenses. And then in attachment B, you have your projected or updated projected reserve balances. And as a reminder, any grant related funds are exempt from our target reserve policy. So really only the Legislative Activities Fund is the only fund that we're making an amendment to that is subject to the reserve policy. So if anybody, that's all I have. If anybody has any questions on any of these items, I'd be happy to answer.
Questions from committee members? Mr. Tony?
Yes, please. I'm interested in learning a little bit more about the spend down of the Lawyers Assistance Program, particularly the first proposed amendment to convert $100,000 of the loan program into a grant.
Mr. Tony, can I interrupt you? I think you may be ahead of us.
Oh, I'm sorry, we're not on that one?
No.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I apologize.
Not a problem at all. This is just the budget adjustments to the,
I thought that was a budget adjustment. I'm sorry.
It is, but it's a separate item.
I'm sorry.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, okay.
yeah,
Yes.
Sorry, my bad.
and I'm right there with you because I have a couple questions on that one as well. I don't see any questions from any other, from any of the board members on this particular item. Tinny, can I get you to call the roll, please?
We need a motion in a second.
Oh, that's right, we sure
Yeah, the
do.
resolution.
Happy to make a motion?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Tony, second by Mr. Buenaventura. Tinny, would you please call the roll?
Broughton, absent. Buenaventura,
Aye.
Good, absent. Tony,
Aye.
Sowell,
I'm an aye.
3 ayes, 0 nays, motion carries.
Very good. All right, now we are on the spin down item. Araceli, I think you're on again. please.
Yes, me. Thank you. Luisa, if you see Bridget, can you please, I'm going to have Bridget Grammy join. She will be able to better help answer questions that I think I'm anticipating on the LAP, the Lawyers Assistance Program spend down plan. So while she joins, I'll just start really quick. The board policy has a reserve policy where, those funds subject to should be on the minimum end 17% and on the high end 30%. When funds are over 30% for more than 6 consecutive months, we have to propose a spend down plan. And based on our numbers, there's 2 funds listed in this agenda item that there are in excess of that maximum target of 30%. And one is the Lawyers Assistance Program, and the other one is the Legislative Activities Fund. Really quick on the legislative activities fund, while this is over 30%, as I mentioned in my previous agenda item, the fee that normally supported this fund was converted to opt-in, from opt-out to opt-in. So a lot of revenue has, we did expect a significant decrease in revenue with that change, and we are proposing no spend downs, and given the future significantly decreased revenues, the excess reserves of these funds are actually going to get depleted over the next few years. So we don't want to propose any spend down and use those reserve funds for any planned activities going forward. And then on the lawyers assistance program, the details are listed in here, and maybe Bridget, I'll pass it over to you so you can maybe explain a little bit what it is and answer any questions from.
Sure, no problem. So, and I'm happy to answer questions, but our proposal for the spend down for LAP would be for $100,000 of it would be for a financial assistance. We already do provide financial assistance to people who are participating in LAP, and this would be a way to provide additional funds, additional financial assistance, and really convert it to more. Well, we're looking at whether we can make it more of a grant program than a loan, the way that it's kind of set up right now. But that's the idea, is to help provide financial assistance for those who are participating in the LAP program. They have to pay fees such as for group facilitation fees. Those that are participating in the monitoring program have to pay for some testing and some other additional costs. And so we want to be able to provide financial assistance there. The other aspect of it is we're asking for $150,000 for more of a unique program that will be part of the support. It's part of the support LAP. And if you recall, I believe it was last year, it might have been the year before, there was a statutory change to the LAP statute, and it expands the types of services that the bar can provide in supporting attorneys to include behavioral health. And as we've been doing a lot of outreach, particularly with respect to substance use and wellness, we've learned that there is a particularly high number of small and solo practitioners who experience a feeling of overwhelm. And some of the things, based on the feedback that we've been hearing and consistent with our strategic plan, goal 3, to be more proactive in helping provide additional resources to attorneys, we came up with the idea to infuse some of the resource or the reserves into a small and solo like law practice management program, where we can invest in an e-learning program for law practice management to help reduce some of these feelings of overwhelm and provide some additional resources targeted to help small and solos. The other idea is there are some other particular subscriptions that we're looking into that might, for example, providing technology assistance to attorneys, wellness resources, those types of things that we thought we might be able to pilot and use, particularly to help this particular population in supporting them in their practice management. So that's the idea. We have existing staff already, and as part of our reorganization and focus on this behavioral health as it is, we have the people in place, and now we can, we're just thinking that we can invest some of these reserves in helping to build out that program. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Very good. Mr. Tony, I'm going to turn to you.
Thank you for your patience with me. So one is just a step back kind of question. Remind me the difference between the lawyers assistance program that is managed by the state bar and something whose name I forget but sounded similar to that's administered by the California Lawyers Association, that maybe the state bar contracts with them. I just want to make sure when I talk about this program, I'm talking about the right program.
Sure. I'm not sure exactly. There are probably many different resources out there to help support attorneys who are in need, particularly in help with substance use issues and mental health issues. But what we do provide, and it is a statutory provision, some of the licensing fees go directly to support this lawyer assistance program. We have two different versions. So we have a monitoring program, which is sometimes many respondents in the discipline system might end up being referred to the monitoring program, where they go through a very specific recommended treatment, and we work through with these attorneys in group settings, and making sure that they're staying on track, work with the state bar court. That's part of the monitoring system. We also have a support where we provide different services to attorneys who might not need the level of monitoring, but might need some type of assistance. And we provide career counseling, we provide 2 free personal counseling sessions. Those are some of the things that we already offer. And we're looking at how do we, kind of target and expand that program to something that can be useful to attorneys and, in not only maintaining their own wellness, but also serving their clients and helping them to better manage their law practice.
Thank you. If I could
Please.
just go on a little bit more. So I'm interested in the time period of this 100,000 grant proposal. Is it if it's approved by the board today, is that to be expended in the next 5 months, now through the end of our fiscal year? Is it meant to be spent in 12 months or a longer period? That's a lead up to another question I have. I'm just trying to make sure I understand what the parameters are.
I don't have the exact numbers right now on when we would need to spend it down. I think a lot of times it depends on when people apply, and I think it's just making sure that we have the amount of money set aside so that we can do that. I don't have those numbers directly with me right now, but we can certainly look into it and provide it to you.
Okay, well, let me go ahead and make my final point, and it's more of a concern, and it has to do with, if we were looking at this, I'll tell you what would concern me less, is if we were looking at this as an ongoing program because of the revenue expenditure, and that we would have, and it doesn't have to be exactly 100,000, but we would have a grant program that is ongoing and sustainable, then I would be more okay with that. What I can't tell from this proposal is this a one-time thing, and that is likely not to be repeated? And my concern is raising expectations that cannot be sustained in the future. So it's just, if there were a way to organize this so that, if you did $70,000 per year projected over the next 5 years, we could sustain that. To me, that's better than saying, we're just going to do 100,000 next 12 months and then it'll be gone. And it's about expectations. That's my only point. I'm through.
Yes, I understand that. And actually, this is an ongoing program, and the statute actually requires that we provide financial assistance. So we have been doing that since the beginning of the program. Something that we have a subcommittee of the Lawyer Assistance Program Oversight Committee looking at is how can we provide additional financial assistance? What other things can we do? And so that's something that they are actually exploring, the format of what this might look like. Is there a way that we can, administer it more as a grant, as we've been talking about? Are there certain investments that we can do so that we can, we're looking into some different operations of it. But this would just, since we have the reserves and we're looking for ways to target, this is a priority for us and for the Oversight Committee to be able to provide assistance to people who need it. And so that's the idea behind the spend down plan now.
And I would just add that this is not the first time that reserves have been built up in the fund. So the fund does sort of on an ongoing basis operate with revenues in excess of expenses. So to your concern, I do think should the Lawyer Assistance Program Committee determine that this is the best path forward, there likely is sufficient funding to implement this strategy on an ongoing basis.
Yes.
More from you, Mr. Tony? Mr. Buenaventura, questions? I have a few questions, and I think mine are a little bit more fundamental. And my questions are not at all a value judgment based on the proposal that's before us in terms of the spend down for the Lawyer Assistance Program, because I do think what's been presented has real value. I know the board has a multiplicity of funds. And in many respects, each of those funds has, various sort of requirements and stipulations in terms of what can be transferred, how it can be used, those sorts of things like that. But in this particular instance, I think what's concerning me is that we know that overall we have some problems with our budget. And if we have excess revenue, excess fund balances in some of the funds like this lawyer assistance fund, what is precluding us from either borrowing or transferring some of that money into our general fund? And I think that's my question. As I read the BMP code, it says, particularly for this fund, it says it may be transferred to the client security fund. We chose not to do that with the proposal that you're presenting with us today, but it doesn't say anything about precluding us from transferring or borrowing that money. And maybe there's somewhere else in code that might speak to that. But that's my overarching question, which is a fundamental question trying to deal with our larger sort of budget situation as opposed to just this program and this fund and this spend down.
Arnie, I did bring up that question to OGC and Don as well, see if there's something we can look into. Right, I mean, we don't have an answer today. I don't think we've gotten we've been able to get an answer today, but I know OGC is looking into that.
Thank you. Yes, she did flag it for us, and we did a preliminary review, Chair Soel. The statute that actually allows, the funds to be charged for LAP allocates those funds for specific reasons for that program. And the statute then says if you have a reserve, you may transfer it to the client security fund. We read the statute to mean that you can use it only for this purpose, but if you have a reserve, the only thing you could do with this is transfer it to the client security fund. It doesn't say general fund, it doesn't say to any other fund, and for that, we, at least our reading of the statute in a very brief period of time suggests that we will not be able to do that because of legislative, and statutory language. We can, of course, see if we could approach the legislature to see if there would be amendable to, some amendments. We could work with Donna and her team, but as it's drafted now, I think we're precluded from being able to do that.
So I'll give you my read on it as a longtime legislative staffer. My read would be, yes, it says may, but it's silent on whether or not it can be transferred to other funds. And, my legislative read as a staffer would be, you take the action. And if the action is then challenged in court or whatnot, then you deal with it then. But I don't think that it necessarily, just by saying, by the use of a may, for the client security fund would preclude us from doing something else with it if we so chose. But that, I'm not a lawyer, but I have dealt with statute for a long time in situations like this. And so I guess here's what I think here's what I would ask for the committee's consideration. I'm not necessarily sure that we have to take action today in order to deal with this. I would ask maybe the general counsel, maybe just if the team might spend a little bit more time with this, whether or not we may want to even approach the legislature to try to figure out whether or not that this might be an option, and talk to some of the staff about not only this fund, but maybe other funds that may be carrying reserves that we should think about, given what our current sort of fiscal situation is. And so if it's okay, and with the other committee members, I just sort of ask maybe we bring this one back next month, if that makes sense.
I think that's, oh, sorry. Not a committee member.
Ray, were you gonna?
Oh, I was just gonna say, when you were starting to talk about some of the words of the statute and the issue of may and trying to figure out a way if we can use some of these funds, I got a little uncomfortable with the idea of not having the authority. I'm more of a believer in, I want to know what the law is, and I want to have some authority to back up any decision we make. However, I do believe if there, I draw on your experience as a former legislative staffer, and if statutes are made in a way that, you know, it also takes into consideration, if they don't say something on the subject matter, then maybe the intent of the legislator is to make it open game. But I am uncomfortable with the idea without having the authority. So I support your request to move this to another day so we can get more sort of definitive authority on what we can do. Because I think we have to get this right, and I think we're in a time where the trust of the public is critical, and so we really got to do things with the proper authority. So I appreciate the discussion. Thank you.
Mr. Tony, anything from you, comment-wise?
It's just that I support both, Trustee Sowell, what you have suggested, which is to have conversations, okay, with the legislative staff. Because I do think, I feel like Trustee Buenaventura, that we really want their blessing on this. We don't want to then hear them come back and say, you know, this really wasn't the intent. And, you know, for them to feel like we did an end run around them. You know, I think the point is right, that we're building, you know, trust, rebuilding trust, quite frankly, with the legislature. And the step that you recommended, Trustee Sowell, is a good way to do that.
Very good. Leah, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I don't see any issue, and Bridget, jump in if you do, with postponing this action. And in fact, it could time nicely with the update on our finances to the legislature that the auditor recommended we submit by October, based on our for many reasons, we feel we need to do that sooner anyway, and we will talk about that at another opportunity. But as part of that overall update, we could certainly float the existence of the reserve in this fund, and the other fund that could potentially be at issue is the Client Security Fund. And there we'll be providing a comprehensive overview of our finances, and I think it's a great opportunity to solicit feedback on the possibility of tapping into those funds to address the shortfall that will be identified in that update. So, long way of saying, I think it's fine unless there's some sense of urgency that I'm not aware of.
Very good. And please, for committee members and others, don't take this line of reasoning as wanting to play it fast and loose with the rules. I want to make sure that just want to make sure that whatever ground we decide to trot on, that we're on solid ground. All right. Very good. So with that, I think we're gonna push this one at least a month, and then let's move to the next item that's on our agenda. So I have to make a motion to do that?
Correct.
All right, very good. Can I have someone, one of the members, just sort of make a motion that we'll postpone this for a month, please?
If an item is on the agenda and no one makes a motion on it, then no action has been taken. I don't know why you need a motion to move something to another time. You simply decide not to take action. There's been no motion to approve it, so I'm not sure. I think you asked for a motion. I mean, if there's no motion to approve it, I think you go to the next agenda. I don't see any reason we need to vote on postponing it.
I think this is one of the situations that could be handled either, we've heard you and we could bring this back to you in September. Maybe I don't believe we have a meeting in a month, so we could bring it back to you at the next Finance Committee meeting. Or if the committee wishes to make and actually take an action to continue the item to that meeting, you can handle it that way too. But I think since there's no dispute on the within the members who are attending and commenting, then I think we have a clear direction, so.
So very good on that, but Leah, I want to go to your point. The timing on this, when is, not necessarily saying that we need to articulate the timing here, but I just want to have a better understanding of that.
I think to give us flexibility, it would be best to take trustee Tony's approach and just take no action on this item because the timing of the legislative update is a little bit unclear, and we will be talking about that with the board, and there'd be another opportunity to do that during these 2 days, and then we could figure out the right timing to bring this back to the Finance Committee.
Very good. Mr. Tony, appreciate your comments and the direction that you put forward. We won't take an action on this particular item, and we'll move to the next item. And that item is the approval of the 2023 Q1 financial statements. And I think Araceli, you're back in on this one as well.
Yes, Megan. Thank you, Bridget. I will be sharing my screen so for our presentation for this one. So please let me know once you see the presentation in its proper form. Is my screen? Can you guys see my screen?
We can, Araceli.
Okay. So this item, I will be presenting the results of our Q1 financial statements. I will go first through our revenue highlights, and then the following slides, I will go into the expense highlights, excuse me. So here, I'm presenting our actuals through March, the first quarter of the year, compared to budget. As you can see, our operating revenues, actual operating revenues were 188 million, so that's about $8 million under budget. As you can see, the variance why our revenues are less than budget is really all mostly from the grant-related funds. So Equal Access Fund, the Grants Fund, and the Legal Services Trust Fund are grant-related funds, and those are the ones that are really causing the variance between our budget and actuals. And all of the grants funds are passed through. We get money from different judicial council and different entities, and we pass those through to subrecipients. So it really is all passed through for the most part. So just to highlight a few of the funds here, the general fund was slightly above budget by about $1.5 million, and that's really just more mandatory fees that we collected, as well as pass-through insurance commissions. This pass-through insurance commissions, we receive revenue from third parties that we usually disperse in the same quarter, but in this case, we received most of that revenue at the end of the quarter, and we were not able to disperse it and pass it through until Q2, so that cost a little bit of the general fund variance. Equal Access Fund, as you can see, it is below budget. This is another grant-related fund, and it's really just the delay in grant revenues from when we expected. We didn't receive all of the revenue in Q1. Legal Services Trust Fund, as I mentioned in my prior budget amendment item, has been significantly higher than budget consistently, and that's just because our average account balances are higher than what we've been anticipating, as well as our interest rates being higher than what we anticipated. So that's causing the Legal Services Trust Fund, and in particular the IOLTA accounts, to have much more revenue than we had anticipated. For admissions, it's pretty in line with budget. It's slightly over by $500,000, and that's just really, we had slightly more applicants sit for the February exam. I want to highlight really quick the other funds. The variance is only about $500,000, a little bit over $500,000. Sitting in here is, for example, the elimination of bias funds, the justice gap funds. We did get more revenue from those, but offset in this line item is the legislative activities fund, which I've also previously explained, turned into an opt-in, so there was a reduction in revenue, and that brought down that increase in revenues down. Moving on to our expenses for the first quarter, our operating expenses resulted in about $90 million. That is also below budget by about $20 million. And again, as you can see here, based on all of the funds that make up those numbers, it's really, again, the grant-related funds that are causing that variance. Otherwise, the general fund, it was pretty in line with budget, only about $300,000 below. We just had slightly lower expenses in our services expense categories. Equal Access Fund, a little bit above budget, and that's really just all the disbursements from the grant-related funds. Our Office of Access and Inclusion outlines those disbursement schedules, and there was just a change in timing from what they had anticipated. Similarly, for the grants fund, yes, well below our budget, and really that's just the timing of, in particular, the Homeless Prevention 3 and Homeless Prevention 4 disbursements. We didn't get all of the funding we anticipated in order to disperse those grants, so there was a delay in the timing, but we did make those subsequent disbursements in Q2. Legal Services Trust Fund is right on target. Admissions, again, similarly slightly below budget. Again, we did have slightly lower than expected exam costs in February. That accounts for that variance. And the Client Security Fund is also slightly below budget by a little bit over $500,000. And again, those are just, the claims that we're getting are just have been deemed ineligible for payment. So they're not paying out as much as they anticipated. Otherwise, we're pretty, as of Q1, we're fairly on target for all the other non-grant related funds. And that's really all I have in terms of our Q1 results. Happy to answer any questions anybody may have.
Questions for Araceli on the Q1 financial statement? Araceli, I do have one.
Sure.
And that is, this committee, as well as the board, has taken action to increase fees in various sort of categories. And could you just remind me when those fee increases begin to kick in, or have they already kicked in?
We will see most of that impact in 2024. I know some of our general fund programs, and I'm trying to remember all of the ones that we did increase. We are right now working on getting everything updated on our end as we start receiving money. I think for Law Corps, and I think LLP might be coming due in September, I want to say. I could get back to you on the exact timing, but most of the impact we will see in 2024.
Gotcha. All right. Thank you. I'm not sure, was this an action item or is this?
Yes, there is a resolution.
Okay.
Yes.
So I get a motion to accept the Q1 financial statement, please.
I move that Finance Committee recommends approval of Q1 2023 financial statements.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Tony, second by Mr. Buenaventura. Tenny, can I get you to call the roll, please?
Broughton, absent. Buenaventura.
Aye.
Good, absent. Tony.
Aye.
Sowell.
I'm an aye.
3 ayes, 0 nays. Motion carries.
I think that concludes our work today. I don't know where we are in terms of schedule, but I think that includes our work today.
We're on schedule.
Right on time.
All right, very good. Thank you.